The United States government is currently facing a massive problem regarding the F-35 Lightning II, a weapons program that has ballooned into the most expensive in human history. With a total lifetime cost estimated at $1.8 trillion, this project was sold to taxpayers as the ultimate solution for air dominance. However, the Trump administration recently sparked a firestorm by publicly dismissing a rival Swedish jet, the Saab JAS 39 Gripen, as an inferior product and a cheap alternative. This dismissal was intended to protect American financial interests, but it backfired completely when real-world data began to leak. These leaked military documents and suppressed combat exercise results tell a story that the Pentagon is desperate to keep quiet. The expensive F-35 is being consistently outperformed in key areas by the cheap Swedish Gripen. This situation has created a genuine credibility crisis for American defense leadership, because the gap between political rhetoric and military reality is widening. For years, the narrative was that the F-35's high price tag was justified by its invisible stealth and advanced computers. But in actual multinational drills, American pilots have experienced a series of embarrassing wake-up calls. The Swedish Gripen has been quietly humiliating American-made aircraft in exercises held all over the globe, proving that it isn't just a budget option, but a world-class predator. When a jet that costs a fraction of the price starts killing the most expensive jets in the world during simulated combat, it calls into question whether the $1.8 trillion spent by the US was a revolutionary investment or a historical mistake. The crisis goes deeper than just the cost of the planes. It involves the very foundation of how the US maintains its status as a global superpower. If America's closest allies begin to see that a smaller nation like Sweden can build a more reliable, more efficient and more effective fighter jet, the monopoly held by American defense contractors will vanish. The Pentagon is currently fighting a PR war to stop people from talking about these exercise results, because they expose a terrifying truth. The F-35 is a complex diva that requires perfect conditions to operate, while the Gripen is a rugged warrior that can fly circles around it for a fraction of the cost. This isn't just about one airplane being better than another. It's about a $1.8 trillion investment that is now facing a total collapse of confidence from the very pilots and allies who are supposed to rely on it. To make matters worse, this credibility gap is fracturing the most important defense alliances in North America. By trying to bully allies like Canada into buying the F-35 while trashing the Gripen, the US government has signaled that it cares more about protecting its $1.8 trillion project than it does about actual military capability. The high retention of these story details is vital, because it explains why so many defense experts are now sounding the alarm. We are witnessing a moment where the most expensive weapon ever made is being unmasked as a liability, while a cheap Swedish alternative is proving that intelligence and efficiency are more lethal than raw spending. By the time you finish looking at the data, you will see that the F-35 program isn't just a financial burden, it is a system that may never recover from the reality of its own underperformance. The diplomatic tension between the United States and Canada reached a breaking point when US Ambassador Pete Hoekstra issued a direct and public ultimatum to the Canadian government. Speaking to CBC News in early 2026, Hoekstra warned that there would be serious consequences if Canada decided to abandon its full order of 88 F-35 fighter jets in favor of the Swedish-built Saab Gripen. This was not a subtle suggestion, it was a blunt threat directed at one of America's oldest and most reliable allies. The ambassador explicitly stated that if Canada chose what he called an inferior product, the United States would be forced to rethink the entire North American Aerospace Defense Command NORAD agreement. This joint military pact has been the backbone of continental security since the Cold War, and the threat to alter it sent shockwaves through the international defense community. This ultimatum essentially told the Canadian government that their sovereign right to choose their own military equipment was being revoked. Hoekstra argued that if Canada failed to provide the interoperable capability of the F-35, the US would have no choice but to fill that gap themselves. He suggested that the United States would purchase additional F-35s for its own Air Force and fly them into Canadian airspace much more frequently to address potential threats. For many Canadians and political analysts, this sounded less like a defense partnership and more like a hostile takeover of their skies. By claiming the US would take command of Canadian airspace at its own discretion, the ambassador was effectively saying that if Canada didn't buy American planes, America would simply ignore Canadian sovereignty and patrol the territory as it saw fit. The timing of this pressure is significant because it highlights how desperate the Trump administration has become to protect the F-35's market share against the rising success of the Gripen. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney had ordered a review of the multi-billion-dollar F-35 deal after costs reportedly ballooned from $19 billion to over $27 billion. As the Canadian government began looking at the Gripen, which is significantly cheaper to operate and better suited for rugged Arctic conditions, the US responded with mob boss tactics. The threat to undermine NORAD is seen by many as a way to weaponize a security alliance for commercial gain. It has forced Canada into a corner where they must decide between a massive financial burden or the risk of a fractured relationship with their most powerful neighbor. Furthermore, this pressure campaign extends into the digital realm, as US officials have privately suggested they might block Canada from accessing highly classified intelligence networks if the Gripen is present. This is known as the red card strategy, where Washington uses its control over encryption and data links like the Link 16 network to make it impossible for non-American jets to communicate with the rest of the alliance. By threatening to shut down part supplies or intelligence sharing, the US is signaling that its allies are no longer treated as equals, but as dependent customers. This level of coercive diplomacy has not only damaged trust, but has also turned a standard military purchase into a major sovereignty crisis that could change the map of North American defense forever. While the Trump administration continues to dismiss the Swedish Gripen as an inferior product, the actual combat record of this aircraft suggests that American defense planners are in deep denial. The most significant turning point in this story occurred during the Red Flag Alaska 2006 exercises, one of the most prestigious and intense aerial combat simulations in the world. During this event, the Swedish Air Force was placed on the red team, the aggressor force that is traditionally expected to lose. To make the test even more difficult, the Gripens were deliberately handicapped. They were given limited ground support and restricted access to EBWACS, Airborne Warning and Control System, which is the eye in the sky that tells pilots where the enemy is. Essentially, the Gripens were sent into the fight blind and outnumbered against the best technology the United States and its allies had to offer. What happened next shocked the entire international aviation community. Instead of failing, the Swedish pilots used the Gripen's unique data link system to connect their jets into a private, high-speed network. They turned their own flight group into a mini AWACS, sharing radar data so perfectly that they achieved total battlefield awareness without any help from the outside. On the very first day of the exercise, the inferior Gripen scored 10 simulated kills against some of the most advanced jets in the world, including the Eurofighter Typhoon, a twin-engine powerhouse that is widely considered one of Europe's top air superiority fighters. Most impressively, the Gripens achieved these results with zero losses. They remained completely undetected by enemy sensors, moving through the Alaskan skies like ghosts. The individual performances of the Gripen pilots were even more staggering. During one specific close-air combat engagement, a single Gripen pilot managed to knock down 5 American-built F-16 Block 50-plus fighters. These are the top-tier versions of the F-16, flown by highly trained American crews, yet they were systematically eliminated by a single Swedish jet. Throughout the entire multi-day exercise, the Gripen never lost a single aerial encounter and never failed a single mission objective. While the American jets were dying in the simulation, the Swedish team was proving that their smaller, cheaper aircraft was actually more lethal in a real-world combat scenario than the massive, expensive platforms Washington was trying to sell. Perhaps the most telling moment of the entire exercise had nothing to do with shooting missiles, but with the weather. Alaska's conditions are notoriously brutal, and during the 2006 drills, a severe weather front moved in that grounded almost every other aircraft in the exercise. American F-15s and F-16s sat on the tarmac, unable to take off because of the safety risks and technical limitations caused by the cold and wind. However, the Gripen, designed in Sweden to operate from frozen highways in the middle of winter, was the only fighter in the entire exercise that performed every single planned sortie. It didn't miss a single flight. This demonstrated a level of reliability that the F-35 program can only dream of. It proved that a jet is only superior if it can actually get off the ground when the war starts, a reality that makes the Trump administration's inferior label look increasingly like a desperate lie. The military success of the Swedish Gripen is not an isolated event or a lucky break. It is the result of a consistent pattern of dominance in international combat drills that has left military experts stunned. One of the most telling examples occurred during joint exercises with the Royal Norwegian Air Force. In these drills, the Swedish team was outnumbered, sending only 3 Gripens into the air to face off against 5 Norwegian F-16s. This was a direct test of quality versus quantity. In the first round of combat, the result was a perfect 5-0 score in favor of the Gripens. In the second round, the Gripens repeated the slaughter with another 5-0 sweep. By the third round, the score was 5-1. This means that across 3 full rounds of high-intensity simulated war, 3 Swedish jets systematically destroyed 15 F-16s while only losing a single aircraft. This proved that the Gripen's advanced sensors and electronic warfare systems allow it to see and kill enemies before they even know they are being hunted. The humiliation of American-made aircraft continued during Exercise Loyal Arrow in Sweden. In this specific engagement, 3 United States Air Force F-15C Eagles, which are legendary air superiority fighters designed specifically to dominate the skies, were intercepted by a single Swedish Gripen acting as an aggressor or enemy. Despite being outnumbered 3-1 by America's premier heavyweight jets, the lone Gripen pilot managed to simulate shooting down 2 of the F-15s. The third F-15 only managed to survive by using its superior engine power to turn around and flee the engagement area. This result sent a clear message to the Pentagon. Having a bigger, faster, and more expensive engine does not matter if a smaller, smarter jet can outmaneuver your sensors and lock its missiles onto you before you can react. The F-15s were technically faster, but the Gripen was more lethal. Perhaps the most famous example of the Gripen's world-class capability took place during the Falcon Strike 2015 inches exercises in Thailand. This was a rare opportunity to see how the Swedish jet performed against heavy Russian-designed aircraft, specifically the Chinese People's Liberation Army Air Force Su-27 flankers. Over the course of the exercise, the Thai pilots flying the Gripens absolutely crushed the Chinese opposition. The final tally was 41 simulated kills for the Gripens and only 9 losses. What makes this even more impressive is the way these kills were achieved. A staggering 88% of the Chinese jets were shot down from beyond visual range, meaning the Gripen pilots detected, tracked, and fired on the Chinese aircraft from more than 19 miles away. The Chinese pilots often died in the simulation without ever seeing the Swedish jet on their own radar screens. These consistent results across different continents and against different types of enemies prove that the Gripen's technology is genuinely world-class. It isn't just a budget airplane. It is a highly specialized hunting machine that uses superior data linking and radar integration to win fights. While the Trump administration calls it an inferior product, the actual flight data shows it consistently beating the F-16, the F-15, and the Su-27. In the world of air combat, numbers don't lie. When one jet repeatedly achieves 5-0 or 41-9 kill ratios against the most famous fighters in history, it is no longer a fluke. It is proof of systematic dominance. This record of success is exactly why the US government is so desperate to dismiss the Gripen, because the more people look at these exercise results, the more they realize that the most expensive jet isn't always the one that wins the war. The genius of the Swedish Gripen lies in a design philosophy that prioritizes survival and efficiency over raw, expensive vanity. Sweden is a small nation that recognized early on it could never win a spending war against a superpower like Russia. Instead of trying to build the most expensive jet possible, they focused on building the smartest and most practical one. This resulted in a short takeoff and landing capability that is virtually unmatched in the Western world. While most modern fighter jets require massive, vulnerable concrete runways that are miles long, the Gripen was built to operate from a simple 500-meter strip of public highway. This means that in a real war, while an enemy might destroy all the major air bases, the Gripen can simply land on a regular road, hide under some trees, and keep fighting. This distributed basing strategy makes the Gripen nearly impossible to wipe out on the ground, a nightmare for any invading force. The ease of maintenance for the Gripen is another area where it humbles more expensive American aircraft. The jet was designed to be serviced by what are essentially conscript mechanics, young soldiers with only a few months of basic training rather than a massive team of highly specialized, PhD-level technicians. A small team of just 1 professional and 5 conscripts can fully rearm and refuel a Gripen in under 20 minutes. This turnaround time is critical in combat. It means the Gripen can fly more missions per day than almost any other jet. In contrast, the F-35 is a notorious maintenance hog. It requires specialized, climate-controlled hangars because its delicate stealth skin and complex computers can be damaged by heat, moisture, or dust. While the F-35 is sitting in a high-tech garage waiting for hours of specialized repairs, the Gripen is back in the air, landing on highways and continuing the mission. When you look at the actual math of operating these planes, the F-35 program looks even more financially disastrous. It is estimated that the cost to fly a Gripen is somewhere between $8,000 and $10,000 per flight hour. Meanwhile, the F-35 costs between $30,000 and $40,000 for every single hour it spends in the sky. To put that in simple terms, for the price of flying one F-35 for an hour, a country could have 4 Gripens in the air. This cost difference is not just about saving money, it is about readiness. Because it is so expensive to fly the F-35, pilots often get fewer hours of actual flight training, and the fleet spends more time grounded to save on costs. The Gripen allows pilots to fly constantly, stay sharp, and remain ready for combat at a fraction of the price. Over a 30-year service life, the savings add up to tens of billions of dollars, enough money to buy an entire secondary fleet of aircraft or fund a nation's entire defense budget. Ultimately, the Gripen proves that more expensive does not mean more effective. The jet's ability to use the Meteor missile, arguably the best long-range air-to-air missile in the world, combined with its low operating costs, creates a terrifyingly efficient weapon. While Washington continues to push the $1.8 trillion F-35 as the only option, the Gripen's low-cost warfare model is winning over allies who realize they would rather have a jet that actually flies than an expensive one that stays in the hangar. The F-35 is built for a perfect world with perfect runways and unlimited budgets, but the Gripen is built for the messy, cold, and unpredictable reality of a real war. This is why the Swedish jet is such a threat to the American defense industry. It exposes the fact that the US has spent trillions on a plane that is harder to maintain, more expensive to fly, and less flexible than a jet built by a country with a fraction of the budget. The F-35 program is currently facing a massive internal crisis that is shaking the very foundation of American air power. Even within the highest levels of the US government, the jet's status is considered shaky and unreliable. President Donald Trump has been one of the program's most vocal critics, famously calling its costs out of control and the worst military value for money in history. In a move that stunned the defense world during a press event in Doha, Qatar, in May 2025, Trump publicly criticized the F-35's single-engine design. He stated bluntly that he doesn't like single engines because of the risk that if one engine fails, the pilot is left helpless. To solve this, he suggested a radical and mysterious super upgrade he called the F-55, a twin-engine version of the F-35 that would essentially require a total, multi-billion-dollar redesign of the entire aircraft. This public lack of confidence from the commander-in-chief has left military officials and aviation experts mystified and has signaled to the rest of the world that even the US president isn't convinced his own flagship fighter is safe or effective. At the same time, the F-35 is being attacked by one of Trump's closest tech advisors, Elon Musk. Musk has repeatedly dismissed the F-35 as obsolete, claiming that the era of manned fighter jets has passed and that the future belongs to autonomous drone swarms. He has gone so far as to call the F-35 a failure at the design level and suggested that the US should stop wasting money on it entirely. When the world's most famous tech visionary and the President of the United States are both publicly trashing the military's most expensive weapon, it creates a massive credibility gap. This internal chaos is a major reason why the $1.8 trillion program is now facing a total loss of trust, as it becomes clear that the people in charge of the country's future don't believe in the tools they are forcing their allies to buy. This lack of confidence is causing a seismic shift on the global stage, as America's longtime partners begin to back away from the F-35. In 2025, Spain officially cancelled its F-35 order, choosing instead to invest in European-built alternatives like the Eurofighter Typhoon. Switzerland also scaled back its order, reducing the number of jets from 36 to 30 after the US tried to raise the fixed price and imposed aggressive 39% trade tariffs on Swiss goods like watches and coffee. These countries are realizing that buying an American jet doesn't just come with a high price tag, it comes with supply chain blackmail. Allies are beginning to see that the F-35 is a tool for political control, as Washington has shown it is willing to use the jet as a bargaining chip in trade wars and diplomatic disputes. The most chilling warning, however, comes from Denmark. Rasmus Jarlov, the chairman of Denmark's Defence Committee, has publicly cautioned other nations, specifically Canada, to choose another fighter jet. Jarlov's warning is based on the harsh reality Denmark is currently living. Their F-35s are grounded and under repair about 50% of the time, and the US maintains total control over every single spare part. He pointed out that Washington has the power to effectively destroy Denmark's entire air force overnight, simply by shutting down the supply of parts or disabling the software. This level of total dependence on an increasingly unpredictable US government has turned the F-35 from a defense asset into a national security risk. For allies like Canada, the choice is no longer just about which plane flies better. It's about whether they want to maintain their own sovereignty or hand the keys to their national defense over to a neighbor that is already threatening to take over their skies. The conflict between the United States and its allies regarding fighter jet procurement has evolved into a dangerous exercise in coercive leverage, as countries like Brazil and Colombia move forward with purchases of the Swedish-built Saab Gripen. The United States is actively exploring ways to weaponize its supply chain to block similar deals elsewhere, including Canada, because the Gripen EF utilizes the American-made General Electric F414 turbofan engine. Washington holds a de facto export veto. This means the US government can legally block the sale of the aircraft to any nation by simply refusing to license the export of the engine. This strategy of leveraging critical hardware like engines and electronic components to force allies to buy American-made fighters is increasingly being viewed not as a security necessity, but as a blunt instrument of economic bullying that undermines the very alliances it claims to protect. The situation is further complicated by threats to restrict access to sensitive intelligence systems. There are credible reports that US officials have warned allies that if they integrate the Gripen into their air forces, they may be cut off from key NATO standard intelligence sharing networks, such as those governed by NORAD. By threatening to treat a non-American jet as an incompatible security risk, Washington is effectively forcing allies into a corner, purchase the expensive F-35, or face the potential loss of real-time intelligence, data link access, and interoperability that is essential for modern defense. This our way or the highway approach has alienated several partners who are now openly questioning the reliability of the United States as a long-term defense provider. This strategy of using military dependencies to achieve commercial goals carries significant risks. While the F-35 is undoubtedly a technological marvel in stealth and high-end sensor fusion, it is a complex, high-maintenance platform that many nations find too expensive and too difficult to keep flight-ready. The Gripen, by contrast, offers a sustainable high-performance alternative that is optimized for reliability and sovereignty. By dismissing the Gripen as an inferior product, the Trump administration is not only ignoring the proven combat effectiveness of the Swedish jet in international exercises, but it is also displaying an arrogance that erodes trust. When a superpower uses its position to punish allies for seeking affordable and capable defense solutions, it invites those allies to look elsewhere for security partnerships. Ultimately, this move toward coercive diplomacy risks fracturing the global defense network that has kept the West secure since the end of World War II. When countries like Denmark, Spain, and Portugal begin to openly voice concerns about the chilling reality of depending on a supplier that can shut down their entire air force by withholding parts, the US is no longer projecting strength, it is projecting volatility. If the United States continues to prioritize the market share of the F-35 over the sovereignty of its partners, it will inevitably push those allies to pursue strategic autonomy. This would lead to a future where the US is increasingly isolated, flying its advanced jets alone, while its former partners build decentralized, resilient defense networks that do not rely on American permission to operate.